interested, I'd made a lot of work around resources, around mining, around new forms of energy, and so on. And I obviously wanted to connect into that work. A lot of that work skews towards the documentary kind of narrative, like a present-day speculations. And obviously in Australia at the moment, to a large extent, we define our identities around our relationship to resources. Australia globally is known as kind of the quarry of the world, and the mining industry, the energy sector really defines the contemporary identity of Australia. And what would it mean to start to imagine a moment beyond fossil fuels and beyond extraction? What happens if we came together to say no and to stop and to turn that off? Would really mean reimagining who we were. And it's not for me to do that. And that was part of working with Natasha, was just to say, like, okay, let's assume as a starting point that we issue a moratorium on fossil fuels and resource extraction, and we just say no in this absolute aspirational moment. We collectively decide that enough is enough, and that is the starting point of our story. Who would we be then when communities historically displaced by these industries would be allowed to move back in and reassert their sovereignty? What does that look like? And that was a simple kind of task of the film. And then really in many ways what I wanted to do with Natasha was to tell a new creation story then from that point, and to say, like, what would this look like? What would be the new values that we would start to develop? And that's really where the collaboration, the story started to come together, I suppose. And then back and forth across Instagrams and so on, Natasha would send me photographs and links to pieces and photographs of butterfish and fishing competitions and so on, to try and introduce me a little bit to the issues and the context of her country and community.
I think when you're thinking about the future, you cannot dismiss the past when it comes to cultural technology and the way we manage the land all the way around the country. Of course, we can't go back. We can't go backwards. We can never have the land the way it was unless we stop using fossil fuels and doing coal mining and stuff. But there is a potential, a massive, beautiful opportunity to work with First Nations people all the way around the country to come up with things like this in our future. We've got so many children that are out there and don't know about things like this, but our children get raised with looking after the land, protecting the waters, and culturally protecting what we have left. But we also want to evolve that. So this is a beautiful piece showing the potential of that thinking.
There's this constant play between the sheer enormity and scale of the infrastructure and the landscapes that we're talking about, and the friction between those infrastructures and the body. And historically, that has been a relationship of violence and the body being displaced by infrastructure. And what we were trying to do was to bring the body back into these landscapes. I mean, that's the very premise of the story, is to say, like, what happens when we turn off these beasts of a past age and we let a community back in. And in this case, this is, one of the welders who's tasked with these new ceremonies of dismantling these infrastructures, stomping on this steel and sending it back beneath the waves to become the frameworks for artificial reef and new fishing communities to grow. And I wanted to celebrate that mode of bringing people back in. And Natasha would be sending me photographs of textures from country, seeds and colors, the scales of butterfish and so on, and sketches of spacesuits and things like that, back and forth on Instagram, and just trying to kind of essentially illustrate those thoughts and ideas and bring those textures and colors back into the work to try and reimagine these extraordinary, massive sites, sites that I describe as being the technological sublime, and to bring these bodies covered and draped in texture and color and pattern into that. as a counterpoint, really, as a counter narrative. So yeah, we see a cast of characters, including these welders, pulling apart these dinosaurs of a past age, the astronauts and the scientists and technicians building the satellites, being key figures of this new First Nation space industry, launching ancestral knowledge into orbit. And the scuba divers kind of, tending to the artificial reef that's growing on these abandoned oil rigs. I wanted to kind of, create these new ways of thinking about what it meant to occupy these sites, and then with Natasha thinking about these new ceremonial characters that would occur within them.
Well, I've seen Liam's work and I've seen the way he speaks about his work, and I use layman's terms a lot. Coming from a mission, I try to keep things simple. So when Liam sent me the narration and said, "What do you think about this?" I was like, okay, we need to make that more relatable to community members like myself, and people who aren't in this world. So it was just finding that balance of reiterating the important scientific things in there, but also dragging people back to what it is to be a human living on the land and living with the law of the land. I don't know if anybody's heard the Irriwee Choir in Adelaide. They're absolutely amazing. They can sing you back thousands of years in one room, especially when they're out on country and singing. They're made up of our elders and young children from the APY lands and from Adelaide. They do a lot of work for the Fringe Festival in Adelaide. They travel as well. But the voices you can hear, and I don't know if you heard them walking in, but there was another track playing for them. They literally transport every cell of you back in time. Every time I hear them sing, even before when I was listening to them, I got a bit teary because they're just so powerful. I don't know if you guys have had an Indigenous choir sing directly to you, but when they do, it just opens up your soul, your chest, everything about you, and you have nowhere to run. You literally have to just take it and let it take you. So it was a very, very proud moment to have them on board. They're beautiful people, and I hope one day you all get to hear them live because it'll change your life.
I just have this list of amazing musicians that at one point I would love to work with, and I sent out a bunch of love letters. And Alex Summers, who is a longtime collaborator of Sigur Rós, came in, and I was and replied, and I was really interested in that extraordinarily haunting sound that characterizes that music, which is both charming and wistful and wondrous, but also slightly melancholic and tinged with tragedy, and it seemed totally right for the nature of the work in many ways. And Alex wrote this extraordinary kind of bed of sound, and then what we wanted to do with the choir was to bring them in to vocalize over the top of that and lift that music. So we organized an amazing session. They sent a bunch of buses out to bring the choir into a recording studio in Adelaide. Natasha came in, and the wondrous team that works and conducts the choir were all there. And then Alex and I were in LA. We lived just around the corner from each other, which we didn't realize at the time. We were on a Zoom call, and I was like,
I zoomed
looks
in
like
for a bit
I remember.
as well.
I remember that. I remember that tree. Where do you live? And he's like, oh, I'm in Mount Washington. Actually, we're 2 houses away from each other. Anyway, so we zoomed in, and we would kind of give notes and conduct in a way remotely through a FaceTime call, and we would just be listening into a room full of laughter and hilarity.
Chasing kids. Kids were running amok in that room.
Yeah, and it was a really special moment, and they would just in real time we'd be playing Alex's score in the background, and they'd be singing. It's a 15-minute score. They'd be singing over the top of it in one take, and then we do it again, and we do it again. And if you hear the sound, it's these sustained choral voices, literally across the length of 15 minutes. But none of it is synthesized. None of it's digital. It's all totally analog. And if you really listen, maybe we need to turn off all the rest of the sound in the show. But if you really listen, you can hear the intake of breath. You can hear when one voice comes in and then runs out of breath and then breaks, and then another voice comes in to take over, and this kind of back and forth, this sort of handing over of tone means that the sound is really alive, and really textured and really human in a way. And across the course of the narrative, it builds into this crescendo as the crafts and satellites launch into the sky. So hopefully, if you see the work, the sound is very, very present, and really it's a work that that can only exist with both the visions and the images of the film, but Natasha's extraordinary and haunting narration and the score coming together.